All right, guys, this is your Unit 1 summative assessment. I'm going to read the passages and questions to you, so use this audio to help yourself follow along. On this assessment, you will have two reading passages. The first is a short story with 6 multiple choice questions. The next is an informational text with 6 multiple choice questions, 12 total. Read each question carefully and select the best answer for each question. All right. Here's the first passage. Part 1, Taken by Surprise by Edward I. Maxwell. Caution: only fully trained and equipped subway employees should ever walk the subway tunnels and tracks. Pedestrians should never step down off a subway platform onto the track for any reason. If there is a dropped item on the track or an emergency, seek out an employee or police officer. Tim loved working in the subway. Loved it. If you pushed him, he'd admit he loved it more than his father. Not more than his mother, but definitely more than his old man. The subway, its tracks, tunnels, rails, and switches were his. Dirty and run down to most everyone else, but magnificent and sprawling to Tim. The strangest part is that Tim loved the subway most when it rained. When it poured, it didn't matter if Tim was even on the clock. He would check in, grab his vest, hard hat, and lantern, and walk the tracks. It was just such a night. Off the clock, but still on the job. Thunder crashed overhead. The tunnel was a cool, wet 50 degrees. Rain dripped through the grates overhead. Little streams flowed underneath the railroad ties. For Tim, this was when the subway really came alive and showed the world its true self. The greatest cavern ever built. The greatest network of caves ever used by man. Tim missed the next tie, and his boot fell hard into the river running between the rails. A critter squealed at Tim's inconsiderate splashing, and he smiled to himself. The last bit of humidity from the 90-degree day moved across his face, pushed by a cool breeze behind. Tim turned into it and looked down the tunnel at the long curving way, flecks of light glancing off the steel. He took a deep, satisfied breath and walked on. Tim did not always walk the subway. He did not always work for it. He used to have a job behind a cramped desk in a cramped office, working with cramped people who couldn't imagine much beyond their cubicles. Needless to say, they did not share Tim's enthusiastic dreams of urban spelunking. But Tim made those dreams a reality and left his cubically caged mates for subterranean trusses, I-beams, and engineered slopes. Moving further along the tracks, Tim grew aware of something completely unexpected out in front of him. With each step, the void ahead seemed to quiet more. Another 30 yards, Tim was standing in a completely silent stretch of tunnel. Water did not drip, critters did not scurry, and street traffic overhead was muffled beyond recognition. Tim felt anxiety grip him, and he immediately switched on his lantern. He needed more light than what laced off the tracks to investigate this exception. The I-beams were the first sight to set his stomach seizing. There was not a single rusted, wrought iron pillar as far as his lantern could stretch. Instead, the beams had been covered, or replaced entirely, he could not tell, by concrete columns gray and sterile to the touch. The concrete had been purposely pockmarked to absorb vibrations as trains passed through, while the iron beams has acted as tuning forks, allowing the clanging chorus of steel wheels on steel rails to resonate around a bend. The new pillar seemed capable of soaking up any ding like a sponge. Tim let his hand run over each geometric dimple and shuddered at the thought of every ding or clang already trapped, unable to dance along, weaving in and out of subway cars. It was in that moment Tim realized also that there was no water dripping down onto his helmet from overhead. He looked up and was confronted by a modern ventilation duct, gently circulating the air. If his journey had begun here in this part of the tunnel, he would not have known that rain was coming down in buckets up above. Tim rested his chin on his chest, shook his head, and cursed to himself. What have they done to this place? His eyes turned downward. Tim realized that the streams between the rails had dried up. The ties were made of pre-poured concrete. The channel was carved with smooth right angles and drainage points all along the way. There was no sign of the ragged, splintered wooden ties that would give way under a car's weight and send a wobble through each passenger's legs. What have they done to this place? The anxiety started to creep back into Tim's mind. The pockmarked and scarred concrete pillars started to resemble the pressed fireproof boards used as part of his old cubicle walls. The space in between tracks looked like linoleum office flooring underfoot. The pre-poured railroad ties were like simple inlaid design work. The vent and clean truss work overhead resembled the ceiling and air conditioning grates that hung lifelessly over his old desk. What have they done to my place? He knew it wasn't going to be long before the rest of the tunnels were redone in the same way. There would be nothing left of the subway of which he had grown so fond. He made his way back down the tunnel and out one of the access points. He was off the clock for good. All right. Remember, I'm going to read the question. You can pause, answer, and then press play to continue. Part A. From this story, the reader can infer that Tim most likely has a difficult relationship with his mother, has a wonderful relationship with both parents, has a strained relationship with his father, loves both of his parents equally. Again, pause, answer, then press play to continue. 2. Part B. Which section from the text best supports the answer to Part A? So which piece of evidence best supports your answer up here? He'd admit he loved it more than his father, not more than his mother, but definitely more than his old man. He used to have a job behind a cramped desk in a cramped office, working with cramped people who couldn't imagine much beyond their cubicles. No one gave Tim much notice. He was only sitting silently, nothing threatening about him. Tim rested his chin on his chest, shook his head, and cursed to himself. What have they done to this place? 3. Quote, the I-beams were the first sight to set his stomach seizing. Based on the text, what is the best meaning for the word seizing as it is used in this paragraph? Rope used for fastening or tying? Shaking uncontrollably? A sudden sharp feeling of pain? Being aware of someone or something? 4. In the passage it states, the anxiety started to creep back into Tim's mind. The pockmarked and scarred concrete pillars started to resemble the pressed fireproof boards used as part of his old cubicle walls. The space in between tracks looked like linoleum office flooring underfoot. The pre-poured railroad ties were like simple inlaid design work. The vented clean truss work overhead resembled the ceiling and air conditioning grates that hung lifelessly over his old desk. Maxwell 20. Based on this paragraph, what does this suggest about Tim's opinion of the new tunnel? The subway tunnel has been turned into an office space and he is not happy about it. The updates to the subway tunnel are starting to remind him of the dull days of working in an office. Tim loves the new changes and is admiring its beauty and craftsmanship. Tim is upset that the new changes are already falling apart. Number 5. Reread paragraph 20. Paragraph 21 states, what have they done to my place? Which emotions best describe how Tim was feeling? Happiness and excitement? Anxious and upset? Nervous and sad? Anxious and amazed? And last question for this passage. What is the meaning of the phrase off the clock but still on the job? Maxwell 8. He was not standing directly on the clock anymore. He had been forced by his enemies to work in the subway tunnels. He was off work but couldn't help to still think about it and check things out. He misses his old job where he is surrounded by people. All right. So that's the first passage with the 6 questions. Once you've answered all 6, press next, and it's going to take you to the second passage.